Hello, everyone. This is A.K. Namul Haq from Bangladesh, and with me, my friend Philip Shah from Canada. Today, we're going to discuss about Afghanistan. This has been a difficult topic for both of us. We have been observing it since our student life, in fact. When we were students, we discussed about all these problems. And for the last 40 years, this country was bleeding for some reason. And even today, people are totally uncertain about it. Two mighty nations, Soviet Unions, went through the experience, and the same thing happened to United States. By the time we finish this talk, probably by the end of this month, there will be no American soldier, US soldiers, or NATO or the Allied soldiers will be in that country. And there has been a lot of disturbing news and disturbing pictures that you and I are watching from that particular country. We're not sure what is going to happen. But today we want to talk and see the perspective from different angles. Probably one from the West, Phil is going to summarize it for all of us, how they see it, the war, the conflict. And probably I will discuss it from my point of view, how we see it from that. Now, remember, both of us are living in a different country. So let me hear from Phil.
Well, thank you very much, Enamel. It's a pleasure to be back again this month. My name is Philip Shaw, and I'm coming to you from Dresden, Ontario, Canada. You know, when this was first brought up to talk about Afghanistan, I thought it was going to be very difficult to chat about because, there's people, Canadians that have died in Afghanistan as close to me as in Chatham-Kent, where I'm from, very close to Wallaceburg. Troops have died from fighting in Afghanistan, but it's just a long history. It's actually a long history with Enamel and I that goes back to university days when Mujahideen were fighting against the Soviets, and we had that arrangement back in those days where the CIA were supporting some of the rebels fighting against the Soviets, and then the Soviets finally pulled out of Afghanistan. Of course, from a Western perspective, everything changed on September 11th, 2001. And, it's difficult to get around that from a Western perspective because that's the day that the airplanes crashed into the World Trade Center in New York City. And as somebody that's lived in North America all my life, totally different from where Enamel grew up, because where Enamel grew up, he actually saw warplanes when he was younger during the Liberation War in 1971. But here in North America, at least in modern times, we're not used to anything like that. We thought we were immune from attack from any of the problems that they have overseas. So what happened from a Western perspective in 2001, as you might remember, is that the Americans decided to attack Afghanistan to get Osama bin Laden because they felt the Taliban were harboring terrorists. And we all know the history since then, that eventually the Americans invaded and, the Taliban left the country, abandoned the country as the Americans and their allies overcame the country. And eventually Osama bin Laden was found in Pakistan and disposed of. And over a period of time, the Canadians became involved, the British became involved, and others became involved to police Afghanistan or whatever they were trying to do. I know at the time there was many different perspectives on that, whether we should have been there or not. But it got to the point where President Trump actually signed an agreement with the Taliban in Doha to withdraw from Afghanistan in May. Somehow that was extended to August 31st. And then, of course, we've had the events of the last few weeks where the Afghanistan government, supported by the Americans and the Allies, has abandoned the country, and the Taliban has taken over. And then we have the problems at the airport where we have now. So what can we learn from this? Well, I would probably ask Enamel to chime in at a certain point, but from a Western perspective, it's difficult anytime that you get into nation building or to some extent, like what has happened. And you can say, well, there's still American troops in Korea, there's still American troops in Germany, and maybe there could have been American troops in Afghanistan. But at the end of the day, you have to ask the question, what are you really trying to do here? And as a 20-year war, does that tell you something about what's going on? And what is Russia trying to do here now that it's over with? And what is China trying to do? And what is India trying to do based on the new instability that we have in the region? There's just a lot surrounding this from a Western perspective. I know none of it's really good to think about. And perspective has changed over time. And it's been, it's over 30 years since Enamel and I first started talking about that. And in the preamble of this discussion, we have even had a discussion about what to talk about. And I was hearing things that I heard over 30 years ago when we were young men with colored hair. So there's a lot to hash out with regard to this issue and what we can learn about this. I'm not quite sure. There's lots of people in the West that say we can learn to never do it again. But of course, it's too late now. It's too late now to say things like that. So I'll throw it over to you, Enamel, and you can take it from there.
No, I think we had many times discussed about it, and I was always skeptical and not for any intervention in another country, whatever is the reason, because I think global order will collapse with that. So one of the things that I always thought that this was not fair, and particularly because these are the extreme religious groups, and everyone knew it. In fact, if you look into these religious extreme views that they have, some of them probably is more of a social than religious, more of a cultural than religious, but somehow Western media has mixed up everything. We live in an Islamic country, Muslim country. Phil has traveled to Bangladesh, and you have seen that two Islamic countries, two Muslim countries do not have the same attitude. Labeling them into a religious flavor, I think is wrong, and is actually in a kind of stereotypical particular group of people, which is unfair. I think if that is what we can learn, that is one thing. The second thing we should learn out of this, particularly the exodus, the last few weeks that we have seen a lot of people going out. One could always ask a question. This is a conflict zone. And this is a conflict zone for 40 years or above. So if you look into the conflict zone, if you look at right now, the total number of immigration or refugees around the world, in Europe, 11% of the total refugees are actually from this particular region. So this particular region means Afghanistan. As a large number of people did not see this country as any prospect. They fled, they left, they wanted to go somewhere else. And yet, we, the world, many countries, more than 50 countries were involved, was trying to rebuild an economy, a country. People who are living there, I was listening to as I was talking to feel that there were soldiers, veteran soldiers, who felt that it was not correct. And obviously, at one point, American presidency understood it. That is the reason probably they realized that it is time to go. But I think if you feel that did we build a country, answer is no. Did we leave an asset to that country? Answer is no. There are many things that we left. Probably is the warheads, probably the military muscles, and we don't know what is going to happen with it. We didn't leave something, an asset for a nation who have been fighting for it for 40 years. Now, the similar scenario happened with the barefooted soldiers in Vietnam. And if we say, did the people learn that we should not intervene? I probably believe it is not, because there will be more intervention in future somewhere else. I strongly believe that we did not learn. We would have learned if the people on both sides understood what has happened. Because when American president left, American soldiers left, the declaration was that we have won. So if I am leaving a country by winning a war, I think they will come back to another country to win another war, maybe another 20 years. But I don't see that learning at all coming. I think that is a very important lapse that people and politicians should have been careful. claiming a victory over this is actually moral boosting the soldier that let us go again, go to another country. And we do exactly the same thing. So I don't think that lesson is there.
Well, the issue from a Western perspective is there had to be some type of retribution for 9/11. And that will never change here. That will never change. Now, you could make the argument that maybe that could be done and then, surgically and turn around and get out much sooner, because President Obama increased troop presence in Afghanistan, and so did the Canadian Prime Minister, and so did the British. And, so these are difficult issues.
I tell you, Phil, this is a very interesting debate. Yeah. We have the Bangladesh, the father of the nation is taking refugees in Canada. Do you expect Bangladesh army to go and kill them?
Well, at the same time,
that's exactly what the Americans have done.
Yeah, well, in this case, Canada has laws that they can't send back fugitives to countries.
But same thing, the same thing. People could have waited using international.
That's right. That's right. But from a Western, that's right. But from a Western perspective,
because you have power.
Well, from a Western perspective, that was not going to happen, no matter how much we could pretend it could be. As far as other countries intervening, Bangladesh is a good example where India intervened in 1971. So, these things get awful messy, right? And there's nothing more messy than Afghanistan, right? And there's not, I'm not really defending a lot of things about what happened here. Sometimes I wonder about the economic potential of that place, after 40 years of war. But it's hard for me to defend anything. I'm just telling you that's, there's some definite realities surrounding 9/11 that made the West do what they did. And 20 years hence, some of it doesn't make sense, but that's looking back in retrospect, when sometimes things look a little different.
I see that, but I don't think it is a fair assessment to go to another country and do this, because every country has their own laws. And if you look into the French law, they say that dressing up women in our culture is what is expected. We don't want anyone else to dress up in any other culture. It's the same language for if you use the same language anywhere, you can say this is what happened. So your laws are there, and if there is no law, then you should go to the international courts. Sudan is a good example where they went to the international court, did not intervene, took time, and that's how you should have done.
I think you understand how, from a Western perspective, 9/11 had to be answered, and so this time it didn't happen.
Yes, I understand. But so my other feeling is that now that 70,000 people are going back to United States, these are the same dress. Don't forget. These are the same group of people going, and don't expect them to become Western overnight. No, my own feeling is that don't expect all of them are what you call Westernized. There are many, these are all not Westernized. And if you are thinking about a society which has been very strong, the religion is not religion, it's culturally strong. If you go to the desert lands, even in India, in Rajasthan, you'll find very similar culture. So remember, some of these veils and burqa that you talked about, it more to do with more culture than 100%.
I agree with that.
Yeah,
I agree with that. And I see that a lot. But in Canada, diversity is welcomed. And like even Bangladesh, for instance, like, correct me if I'm wrong, but Bangladesh was a secular republic. Now maybe that's been changed lately.
No, it is still officially secular.
Right? Officially secular, but in all practicality, it isn't, right? But so anyway, I mean, there's a lot of mistakes that were made from the Western standpoint, and still are being made, I assume. Sometimes I wonder why this is so much more important than the people of Africa and the people of South America and Central America and places like that. But it does harken back. What happened was, partly because of 9/11, and you can make an argument that happened partly because of what happened 20 years before that. bankrolling the CIA, bankrolling some of the rebels in Afghanistan fighting the Soviets. So there's a lot of bad actors here, and I don't know if we'll ever agree on it, but that's some of the reality that I have to deal with from a Western perspective.
No, and I can see, but the thing that I actually felt bad about it is that the media, the leaderships in many of the countries are not recognizing some of the issues, not realizing that this is not something that we should post. This is something from where we should take a lesson. And I think that is what worries me. I'm not worried about Afghanistan. Let their people will decide whatever they want to do. That is their problem. But if you are not learning with powers in your hand, the 56 countries, whoever they are, they're going to go to another world and do exactly the same thing in another 5 to 10 years.
I don't know if they'll be going to the Democratic Republic of Congo and helping them out.
So they will not go to Congo, but they will go to somewhere else, closer, wherever their interest is. They don't go without interest. They do not go without interest. They go
wherever there's strategic interest, right?
Yeah, exactly. Wherever their strategic interest, they will go on the pretext of making things correct. But my own feeling is that is not that basically weakens the value of the West.
And in this case, you have China, Russia, India, Pakistan, United States, Europe, other countries.
Everyone.
So there's a lot of strategic interest. It just happens to be there. And at this time, it's accentuated. So, I mean, this is a very difficult subject. And you can tell, you and I have been discussing this for 35 years. Some of this is old, but of course, it's very new what's going on now. And the American pullout's supposed to be next week. So we'll see what happens. So we'll see what happens next week when the Americans supposedly finally leave Afghanistan.